Welcome to another episode of the Grow My Clinic podcast. My name is Ben Lynch. Today we have an intriguing guest, David Bartholomeusz. So David is a serial entrepreneur and stay-at-home super dad who spends more time volunteering than working on his business and more time with his kids than he does volunteering. He's known for his work in behavioural economics and applied evolutionary psychology and excels in organic growth of communities, both in the private and voluntary sectors. He is married to Sarah Bartholomeusz, the goddess of governance. I met David at a social event and I was so intrigued by this guy. He had passion oozing out of him. And I was like, oh my goodness, I need to get you on the podcast. He just got me into a trance talking about performance, peak performance in business and entrepreneurs. And he works with some incredibly high level people. And so for me, I'm fascinated about, what gets the edge in, a business person? What takes them from where they are to where they want to be? What is that next step? And he was sharing some pearls and I said, all right, we've got to dive deep in a podcast and this is what it is. You'll see that I barely have to ask any questions. He just talks and goes into this different area of performance and psychology. The thing that I found really good and really practical about what David had to say here is that it's not all hype and positivity and optimism. He's a realist. He understands the hardship, the challenge, the stress of being a health professional. That everyone is always coming to us as health professionals with a sickness or a problem or a challenge, and that becomes our environment, almost our stressor. Layer on top of that running a business where you have so many different hats, marketing, team and leadership. You're trying to do operations. You're trying to take care of your clients as well and grow and make sure you do it profitably, sustainably. He understands that. And so he actually dives into an area that perhaps you've faced, hopefully you don't ever have to if you've been free of this, is some level of burnout. I mean, have you ever experienced that point where you're just like, I just need to get away or stop or, once this is over, it'll all be smooth sailing and it'll all be good. He touches on burnout, why that's such an issue and how you can bring some level of awareness to how you're doing and some practical tips and guidance on being your best, living your best life as a health professional in business. This, I believe, is an episode you should probably listen to a couple of times and maybe a couple of months spaced apart because a great mentor of mine said, what you see depends on where you stand. So where you hear this today, I hope it serves you. If nothing else, it'll plant into your subconscious and it'll serve you at the right time down the line. We're going to dive in because what you'll find is it takes a little while for us to get into it, but once we do, David shares some really profound messages that I think will resonate with you as a health professional, if nothing else. So I'll leave it to you to make up your decision. Have fun.
This is the Grow My Clinic podcast by Clinic Mastery, where we help you deliver amazing client experiences to grow your clinic.
David, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Ben. Thanks for inviting me on.
So we had a fascinating chat many weeks ago, and I was really captivated by your passion for what you do and also your deep knowledge and understanding of the world of entrepreneurship and also really applying some things in the life of an entrepreneur to help them be a better person and a better business operator as well. And that's what we get to discuss today. I was like, we've got to have you on the podcast. So let's start with entrepreneur. We're dealing with health professionals in business. It's probably a bit of an unfamiliar word. So could you just share with us entrepreneurs, that audience that you work with? What are some of the characteristics that you would put under the term entrepreneur? Who is an entrepreneur?
So there are some people who find it impossible not to help other people when they see a need.
Mm.
And it's not always healthy to be like that all the time. And for me, the entrepreneur has this blessing and this curse on them, which is that when they see pain in their society or dysfunction in their community, and they can figure out new ways to address old pains, they find themselves incapable of turning away from that. And they will often cause them self-injury, and they're willing to do that in order to try and remove this externalized pain that they see. And so for me, it's why I've often said yes to also assisting medical professionals, particularly entrepreneurial medical professionals, because entrepreneurs and medicos have a lot in common in that for a lot of medicos as well, they see that physical or mental pain in society, and they're, once again, incapable of turning away from it. And so for me, there is a certain level of entrepreneurship or a similar type of psyche going on within every medico. So when I see medicos who are practice owners particularly, it's a fascinating area for me as a behavioural scientist, because that's almost like entrepreneur squared. They're seeing this pain, and then they're seeing the meta pain that exists above at a functional level, particularly within the medical system. A lot of medical entrepreneurs and business owners are more present to the dysfunction in the system. And also they're really present to the importance of medical services being available in the community more widely. And they want to take that outside just themselves helping individual patients. And they want to take that up to the next level and empower other medicos to do the same.
Yeah.
And so for me, in dealing with entrepreneurs, when I deal with medical entrepreneurs, which I do deal with a lot of, it's an incredibly complex and diverse mental space that I get to observe and that I get to support.
Yeah, incredible. I can really resonate with that, and I'm sure a lot of the audience and listeners do, that as a health professional, whether you own a practice or not, you go into it because you want to help people. Like you said, you see a pain or a problem, you want to help. And then go into that next level of business ownership or entrepreneurship, you take on another level of that helping a need that you have and amplifying it through your team, etc., into your community. So then you spoke there about the pain, the challenges perhaps that a health professional in business might experience, and that you then get to see as a behavioural scientist. I'm sure you see many and varied presentations, but what are some of the common challenges or presentations that you see for medical business owners?
One of the most common presentations that I see, which is, it's very common amongst all entrepreneurs, but it's even more pointed with a medical professional because of the cultural and social expectations that are placed on medical professionals.
Right.
Is that entrepreneurs and medical professionals especially are very well resourced. And what I mean by this is that society makes a point of making it easy for these people to do what society wants them to do. And this is, for me, a sinister presentation of society. And this has gone on since tribal days. When someone is extremely good at doing something which preserves the tribe will elevate that person and make that person feel like they're indispensable. And in doing so, they elevate that person to an almost religious level. And that's a big call to make, but it's something that I'm extremely present to when dealing with clients, is that when, say, for instance, if I'm interacting with a billionaire or someone who has 20,000 employees, this person is now elevated to a level which is higher than the holy kings of the Middle Ages in terms of the scope in which people are depending on them. And in those times, those people were considered god kings. And so there's this tribal element within us, which, first of all, the society is constantly, in a way, worshipping us. And in a way, we are then thrust into this role of being this figure in society. And this is the most common sort of meta presentation that I see, is that because of that, at a practical level, we become very self-aware and self-conscious about appearing to be greedy, or weak or dysfunctional, and all of these things which are natural elements of every human being. No human being is perfect. It's our imperfections often that make us who we are. We become increasingly reluctant to express those things. And what we see in that situation is that what makes us unique and what has often been the emotional driver for us to become so capable is often lost in that process, and we start to feel empty. And so invariably, that emptiness is a gap that we like to fill with something. And I see so many medicos and so many entrepreneurs who try and fill those things with stuff which is either is inconsequential and it doesn't satisfy that deeper wanting, or more problematically, we start to see addictions starting to blow out of proportion. And so we see people getting addicted to things which are fairly innocuous, like fast cars, until they hit something really fast. But right through to the deep dysfunctions that we see, sexual dysfunction and drugs and alcohol and these sorts of things, which amongst the entrepreneurial community and amongst the medical community are much, much higher incidence than what we see in the general population. And a lot of people in, especially the entrepreneurial community, they don't understand why that is. I think a lot more medicos do at least have a basic understanding of why that might be. But I think when I explain it in these sorts of terms and people actually start to see how everyone treats them from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, how that feels really, really good, but also how that makes them behave in relation to their internal feelings and emotions, that they can actually start to get some deeper insights into what of that worship is functional and what of it is dysfunctional, and choose and select what to take on board of that, and also choose and select how to design their own behavior to create their best life, not the best life that the community or the tribe is almost tricking them into.
Yeah, wow. And so to gain that perspective, that self-awareness, you obviously get to see and work and deal with these sort of people all the time.
Which, by the way, is like the best fun.
Yeah, I can imagine making it.
It's like an endless narrative of these amazing stories of incredibly capable people just flooding into my consciousness, and being able to see the external results of those behaviors, but being able to get in under the surface and actually understand what it feels like to be a person who's caught in this social morass where we've been, before we were fully aware of it, elevated to a level which was higher than we thought, especially at a subconscious level within society, and going, oh, now that I'm here, how do I actually optimize my function for myself? And also, when I can do that, I can actually operate at a higher level of functioning for the people that are pushing me up, but on my terms now, not on their terms.
Yeah. And so then how important, this is kind of a two-pronged question, how important then is it, perhaps you could speak to the importance or the value of having someone in their life, I'm talking at an individual level here, who can help them through that, and also being part of a community where they can also benefit from having peers like that who are going through similar things. Maybe we'll start with, at an individual level, the importance and perhaps how someone could be of value to a medical professional going through that. They may not even be aware of it. They may not, and maybe you'll touch on that, may not even be aware of it at this stage. But if they are, what sort of role does a mentor, a coach, someone like yourself who's deeply ingrained into the behavioural psychology of it, what sort of role could they play?
It's incredibly delicate to deal with a person who's in this situation. So most people don't want to touch it.
Yeah.
Because most people don't want to break a functional part of society. And I know that sounds harsh, but the reality is the work that I do, if it's not done well, it can actually take people backwards. Incredibly resourced people, if their behavioural lattice is disturbed in an irresponsible way, or even in an inexperienced way, it can really take people off the rails. And for most high-functioning people, that doesn't mean they're ending up getting pulled out of the gutter and dragged off to an AA meeting in 3 months' time.
Right.
But it can be counterproductive in terms of it can take them out of their life's calling, and it can move them into a different loop, which really isn't their best life. But it feels like it is to them, but it's just such a relief from where they were that they will in a way retreat.
Right.
And so there's a lot of people who will disturb someone's behavioural lattice, a high-functioning person, and have them off in an ashram or have them off in somewhere like that. And that's great for that individual. But what it's doing is it's degrading society. And so for me, this is an incredibly responsible area in that, yes, I'm really interested in individuals finding a life that they love and being happy. But society needs to function. And as high-functioning people, we've got a huge ability to make the world a better place. And so for me, the other side of that is I only want to work with someone if I believe that I can help them find their best life, not their happiest life. Their happiest life isn't their best life. Their best life is the life where they're extremely self-expressed. They're not necessarily happy all of the time, but they're having an incredible impact on other human beings and experiencing that deep satisfaction, which for a lot of entrepreneurs, like I talked about, the blessing and the curse, it's how they are. And, I was 10 years in before I gave up on trying to make entrepreneurs happy. Because what I realized was that deeper underneath all of that questing for happiness with cars and all these sorts of, surface presentations that we see was this deeper yearning to have a lasting impact in society and to find meaning through others and in the solving of other people's pain, and in me trying to kind of band-aid that and guide them away into something where they didn't have to think about that anymore. I wasn't actually helping them to get the deep satisfaction, which they were always going to regress back to.
Yeah.
And so for me, being able to create a methodology which allows a person to come at that on their own terms is what I've been really focusing my energy on over the last decade.
Yeah.
Is not teaching people skills. I've given up completely on teaching people skills. Okay. What I've really started to do now is get much clearer about what I call, and as if you look up this, you can see this on, if you Google this, is there are crucible environments. So environments where the human being gets heated up and they kind of melt. These rites of passage is another way that people often refer to it, is that we all go through these rites or these crucible experiences where we are at a crossroads, or we have to make a decision to move our life in the direction of comfort or move our life in the direction of greater self-expression out there in the world.
Yeah.
And what I notice is that the entrepreneur and also the medico, when they're highly resourced and they're fully functioning, they don't ever, ever choose the road of happiness. And for their partners and for the people around them that are normal, inverted commas,
yes,
this is incredibly confusing because this is not normal behavior. But it is the behavior that this person is always going to keep coming back to because of their core values and what is at their core in their heart. And so for me, it's not so much about coaching. It's about helping people, guiding people through an experience of their own life with a higher level of awareness and a greater number of perspectives to be able to develop a lived experience of what it feels like to be constantly elevated in this way, and to be able to have a look at the way that our routines, the rituals that we engage in, and the rhythm of our life continually pulls us back into this same way of operating, which is really great for society, but it's not elevating us to the next level that we want to receive in terms of joy and happiness in our heart.
So one of the common terms that we often hear, and I'd love your insight in this, is burnout. And perhaps there's an element here that where that health professional, and they're in business, is feeling some level of burnout, fatigue, whatever it may be, and navigating through that. Can you share with us, obviously each individual you carefully guide through that experience themselves, but some of the things that might be rules of thumb or even principles when someone might be coming up to that and saying, I feel really burnt out, and perhaps they are looking to change career. sell their business, move on because it's all become too much. I'm sure you've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
What are some of the key...
that's a specific presentation. Specific presentation.
What are some of the key things maybe that we could have some awareness around if you're feeling like that, if someone is feeling like that? Is it normal? I mean, you're in business, you're a health professional. Is it normal to have those periods of burnout? Yeah, what could you share with us on that?
Great. So the first thing to point out here, which immediately is important for people to understand if they feel like they're experiencing burnout, is if you feel like you're experiencing burnout, you're not burnt out. And this is a really important distinction to make. If you feel like you're burning out, that means that you're approaching a rite of passage or a crucible moment or a crossroad in your life. And your subconscious is gearing you up for that. And that feels intensely uncomfortable. But what's happening is your subconscious is reading all of the signs in your environment and say, this looks like stuff from before that really I did not like. It was painful. The human brain primarily learns the same way a rat brain learns. Most of it is just pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain. And naturally, our body doesn't like to be in pain because being in pain is linked with dying. And so everything that goes on in our fight or flight systems, which are the systems for most of us, and particularly, if you're running patients out in 8-minute increments, you could meditate for 30 years. The moment you come back to that, you will be moved into fight or flight because you're stuck in a human body. I'm sorry. And entrepreneurs are the same. They're getting hit with fires every time. And if you're hearing stories from other people, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick every day, if you're hearing those stories, the impact on your subconscious is substantial. So your body stays in fight or flight pretty much permanently. And so in that environment, it's very, very difficult for us to even get to a reflective state whereby we're able to listen to our subconscious and actually start to get a picture of what this better life looks like. And so that's where a lot of that feeling of burnout can come from, is not being aware that we are being bombarded with things which move us into fight or flight. And so for so many people that present with burnout, it's not actually burnout. It's just that our body is sick of being in fight or flight for 60 or 70 hours a week. The human body is evolved to be in fight or flight for very, very short periods of time, maybe 2 or 3 times every day. You might, when you think about where our bodies were evolved, you might see a saber-toothed tiger, you might see a saber-toothed tiger like once a month, but you might see a snake once a week, and also if you're going and getting water down at the water hole and it's a bit dry, you might be watching out for crocodiles every day, twice a day when you get water. But you're talking about very brief periods within the day. So you go and take a risk and then you retreat back and you move your body back into a much more parasympathetic state. And so a lot of people that are putting themselves out to do these big things in the community feel like they're burning out. But the reality is that all that's happening is they're just in fight or flight for so much of the day that their body is sending them signals to shut everything down, where really what it's saying is, imagine if I could just breathe for 2 minutes between each client. Or imagine if there was just one layer of person between me and the external presenting issues in the business, that we met about those things and talked about those things, we talked about those things in detail once a week rather than them hitting me in between clients and those sorts of things. And a lot of this is structural, systematic stuff, which if it's set up, our behavior will snap into these new rhythms. An immense amount of those feelings can actually go away.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is that it's behavioral. And so a lot of people feel like they have to have more willpower.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we have a limited supply of willpower. And when we're functioning at these very high levels, willpower is really, really good if you're, an 18-year-old kid and you need to study for your exams, right? You've got one thing going on, exams.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about earning. You don't have kids to look after. You don't have grandkids. You don't have any of that stuff. You just have exams. Willpower's really good for that. But when you've got children and a practice and a partner and potentially, and for a lot of medicos also an ex-partner, that's too much. Willpower is not designed for that stuff. Systems and structures that allow us to develop habitual behaviors is what creates those long-term, consistent, automatic choices that don't require willpower.
Yeah.
And that's where the real juice is for people functioning at a high level and that want to take their functioning to a higher level and add more value out there in society, but feel more calm and relaxed, is the ability to generate these reflex behaviors that automatically kick in with no willpower required.
Yeah.
When we kick in even 3 or 4 of those with the highest presenting stressors in our life, then that can create an environment where we can immediately move from consistent fight or flight, essentially just a sympathetic cortisol-driven life, to a life which starts to have a balance in our endocrine system.
Yeah.
And this is, people think this is all airy-fairy stuff. It's not. This is neurobiology and endocrine biology. And it's not mysterious to us anymore. We can map all of this stuff using equipment, and we have mapped all of this stuff now. For instance, one of the things that was mapped only a couple of years ago is that us realizing that we have made a decision and made a behavior occurs after we make the behavior. For a lot of people, this is like hold the phone, but all conscious thought occurs after the behavior has actually occurred.
Right.
The system that actually drives the behavior, all of those neurons and that pathway of physical behavior out there in the world, those automatic systems to generate the behaviors in the present moment, all of those systems are triggered and in an independent path, and then our rational brain rationalizes and creates coherence for future behavior. And so this completely invalidates the willpower argument entirely.
Right.
And what it does is it makes extremely available to us the importance of creating environments that pull for habitual behaviors which move our life in a good direction.
Yes. So then,
I know that's a lot potentially for people to take on, but it's an incredibly important distinction, and it's been demonstrated at an electrical level in the human brain and body now. We're getting shouted down by a particular school of psychology saying, but what about free will? We've actually solved that now. There is free will, but it doesn't function in the order that we think that it functions. And that we've been taught that it functions, and that all of our ways of structuring our life, our rituals, our routines, and our rhythms are all built on this idea that we think and then we act. But we don't. We act and then we reflect.
Wow.
And so if we're in fight or flight all day and we don't move into a reflective headspace, no one's driving that bus.
Yes. So you spoke then about systems and the environment to be able to help make a change really for a person who is in that fight or flight all the time. And going back to the burnout, people often say, well, I've got to go, I'm going to have that holiday. And then they do jump back into the seat and then pretty much run the same patterns and do see 60, 70 clients and just it's all the same again. So I imagine you do this very individually, very purposefully with each person that you'd work with and see, but perhaps you can share some of maybe the top 3 or maybe a core set of things that you would change about someone's environment or that they could consider changing to be able to help them get more into that reflective state. What are some of the things that maybe someone who's listening, could be a small thing that they could look to implement and change?
Yeah. So the underlying premise of all behavioral change is very Skinnerian. So for people that know a bit about psychology, more and more we're coming back to this idea that the whole human body, which is the thing that mediates all of the sensory inputs, which then allows our brain to reflect, is driven by pain and pleasure. And so if something is not pleasant for us, it won't persist. And this is the foundation for any behavioral change, is that if I decide, all I need to do is meditate for 2 minutes between every client, and my attitude is, I've got to meditate now. I've got to meditate now. I've got to meditate now. And if I meditate and I close my eyes and it's unpleasant to me, then I'm going to have to use willpower in order to make that behavior stick, which means that at some point in my future, when my willpower is depleted, I'm just going to revert back into the old behavior. And so all I'm doing is I'm setting myself up for just a constant life experience of, I am incapable of changing my behavior. And that's the environment that we all live in all of our life until we decide to learn behavioral techniques which allow us to effectively implement small behaviors in a way which is permanent and effortless. So for me, the bottom line with this is to start figuring out, we can map out what our day looks like and figure out the tiniest, simplest, most pleasant intervention points to make very small behavioral changes. Not necessarily the ones that we want, but ones which are easy, to get some easy wins on the board in terms of changing a behavior. And people consistently get stuck with this because they see external imagery of what their best life looks like. And their subconscious wants to move them towards that, and they try and go straight toward that. And so they do something really ridiculous, like joining a gym. Joining a gym is like the touchstone example of this. Yeah? Joining a gym involves being organized, going somewhere that's not familiar to you, and doing something which causes your body stress. You're setting yourself up with 3 failure points. It's guaranteed to fail in the first instance. That doesn't mean that, people with behavioral mastery, I go to the gym every day.
Yeah.
I go to the gym in New York in the snow, and my wife just finds it bizarre. But it's because, for me, the experience of going to the gym now as a general habit is so ridiculously pleasant. And when I do at the gym, people look at me like, that's not going to the gym. It's like, well, I can't actually do anything which causes my body stress or pain and expect it to endure.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I just ran a half marathon faster than you, even though I didn't train for it, because my habitual environment is causing my body to be quite healthy. Whereas someone who's, training for this thing and pushing themselves, that's not a sustainable situation. And so my number one starting place for people is, what brings me to life that could be a tiny little new thing that I bring into my life. A good example is Sarah just started singing with a high-level performing choir. Yeah. And it's bringing her joy and happiness. And it's also bringing her a huge amount of skills and abilities which move her life forward to her best life. But the foundation is that it brings her joy and happiness. Then that it might bring some great new behavioral changes into her behavioral lattice. That's a secondary effect. And so the foundation piece here is being able to spot tiny little things which do move our life in a slightly better direction, perhaps. But they're different behaviors, but they're pleasant for me. I'm not talking about starting smoking, right? Starting smoking is a bad example because on average, starting smoking isn't going to take the average person's life in a good direction on the long term. It's incredibly pleasant, but it's not on average taking life in a good direction. It's very, very simple. So it's a good example for that. It's simple and it's easy and it's pleasant, but it can move life slightly back.
Right.
And so we're looking for these things to do which are almost an addiction. The only difference between these early behaviors and an addiction is they're innocuous. They don't take our life backward.
Right.
By bringing in new behaviors and learning how to embed a new behavior that's innocuous into our life, the first thing that we do is we slightly disrupt our behavioral lattice, and we see other behaviors shifting in relation to that. And we start to get that shifting one small thing can have knock-on impacts.
Right.
And also we start to develop this self-confidence that, hey, my behavior doesn't just happen to me. The environment that I create and the tiny little things that I've discovered that bring me pleasure, but also move my life in a non-bad direction on average, these things are good for me. And it totally changes the game. From there, once we've got that self-confidence in terms of behavioral mastery, we can start to move to behaviors that really do move our life in a good direction, those individual behaviors.
Yes.
And we start doing a blend of behaviors that move our life forward and behaviors which simply just gently disrupt the behavioral lattice in a non-innocuous way, but allow other really cool behaviors or sets of behaviors to emerge which are naturally in the direction of our best life. Once we've got that mastery, is almost no effort. It's almost zero effort. And this is why everyone knows a person like this, a person whose life is just going well and they're moving toward their best life without effort.
Yes.
They're just people with behavioral mastery. They're not bad people. Don't hate them. They've just learned a different level of awareness, and they're no longer using willpower and struggling to force specific discrete elements of their best life to manifest now because I say so. They're creating an environment where every day they're engaging in slightly better behaviors that pull for their best life to emerge.
Yeah.
Within that overall behavioral lattice. And it's like turning the Titanic. Yeah, we just start with a tiny little bit, and we adjust our course by 1 degree, but over the course of our life, over 20, 30, 40 years, that's the difference between Steve Jobs and random drunk guy living in a dumpster.
Yeah. Wow. I've just found this so enlightening, and I think listeners will listen back multiple times to this episode because there are so many pearls. What would you say a takeaway? Someone's listened to you and we've just skimmed the surface. I feel we could talk for days on this. Certainly I could listen for days. Someone listened to this. What's the takeaway that you have for them, or a message for someone who may be in a challenge or a position where we spoke about burnout, or they're facing or seeing some of these symptoms in their life present, or maybe they're not, they're just going along nicely and they perhaps want to just keep it going nicely.
Yeah.
What's a takeaway message you have for people who are tuning in to this episode?
If you're a human being who is in the blessed and cursed position of being bound to serve others and make the world a better place, even to your detriment, to set yourself up consciously and to take the time to develop yourself as a human being is the foundation of making your biggest impact, and also doing it in a way which honors you as an individual. And that's a win-win. That's going to allow, this is why I do it for myself. This has all come from doing it for myself. In order for me to make the most impact out there in the world, I need to sequester myself away from time to time and create space for the person that is me to be the best possible, vehicle for that change in the world. And so in order for me to be the most dysfunctional and add the most effort to my detriment, I need to take who I am to the next level, and I need to nourish myself deeply. It's like, I think it's in, is it the original Rocky, where he's just having the coach beat the crap out of him because he's preparing for this big fight.
Yeah.
For me, getting involved in this process as a person who is a compulsive helper and desires to make an incredibly large impact in the world before I snuff it, being able to spend time every day strengthening and preparing and building myself up to be able to take even more punishment has become just this wonderful adventure for me. Yeah. Because I know that when I lie on my deathbed, I'm going to look back and go, you just whipped yourself, but you whipped yourself in a really, really smart way, in a way that honored who you were and allowed you to actually extract every single piece of human juice that you had available and put it out there into society. And you did it in a way that actually felt good. That's being a smart, crazy person.
A smart, crazy person. I love that.
At a practical level, the number one thing I would put out there is that this thing where we feel like our external circumstances are moving us towards these kind of points where we just get crushed, that's not going to stop happening. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in the in-group of the people that we're talking about, if you're still listening at this stage. This stuff is probably going to keep happening, and shutting down your business or, taking a year off from your practice, all these things aren't going to make the deeper human parts of you which cause your environment to bring these things to you to go away. That thing that calls your vocation to you, that's you. That's not going to go away. We can either live in denial until we die and medicate our way to an early death, or we can stand up and say, this is who I am and I'm calling this life. So I'm actually going to be about figuring out what the heck is going on and what I can do about it and develop mastery so that this life can keep coming at me. But my experience of the life that my values are calling to me is no longer, I don't have enough willpower, I'm a weak person, and I'm not cut out for this, and feeling like an imposter. I talk to professors of oncology that feel like an imposter because they haven't developed this mastery.
Wow.
Once you have this mastery, the entire experience of this thing, which I'm sorry is going to keep happening because you are who you are, is a completely transformed experience. And the good that we can add is massively changed. The second thing is that this stuff is not complicated. And once it's been experienced, it's something that we can carry with us for our whole life. One of the things that shocks people in this program is how much difference one habit can make, like one simple habit, like getting the right amount of sleep. The way that occurs in this program is completely different. The way that I teach people is completely different to the ways that have failed 70 times before for people, or eating specific foods at specific times of the day that just pull for energy. Or you talked about meditation, knowing instinctively, habitually, how to generate an environment that pulls for and generate the internal habits that allow us to just sequester ourselves away for 1 or 2 minutes when we need it, so that we can so that our behaviors can be coming from a place of calm and reason rather than from reflex, is incredibly powerful. And the other side of this is that training ourselves is incredibly easy once we know how. Most people have had a pet and they've been able to train a pet. Training ourselves to be this amazing vehicle for the betterment of society, once we understand and accept that we are not that much more complicated at a behavioral level than a dog or a rat, and we actually start making the time to train ourselves for best behaviors, for me and for most people that learn this, it's incredibly fun and it's incredibly easy. And so it's, for me, a lovely gift to give someone, to take them from a place of, I don't have enough willpower and I'm an imposter, to, hey, I'm programming a wet computer. This is really fun. It's just a totally different way to exist.
It really sounds like a transformation. Absolutely. And so then someone's listening in. I know you work with some high-level people, high-level entrepreneurs, high-level operators. The work you do is highly...
I only work with those people because this stuff isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
If a person is not well-resourced, if a person doesn't have a good basic environment around them, and if they don't have a level of self-mastery, which has put them into this burnout situation, a genuine burnout crucible situation, then they need to be doing much more basic level behavioral stuff. This is really advanced stuff for people that have already demonstrated internally that their body desires this stuff. People get into these burnout situations because they're actually seeking their highest level of functioning. And so to have arrived here gives me a certain piece of information about a human being's level of functioning already. And now they've reached this internal constraint point. And if I can help them get unstuck, that's a good for that individual and it's a good for society. So you can see why I love what I do so much.
Oh, absolutely. And as I started the episode here, when we were having a discussion a few weeks ago, I was just so amazed at your passion for this, and you were just on fire, and I just love listening to it, and also, picking up some of these 1%ers. So if someone's listened to this, they've got some really good practical things that they could consider incorporating into their world. How can they follow up from here? Do you have some socials or a website? Is there something that they can follow up with from today's discussion?
Certainly there's a specific process. It's incredibly important for me to only deliver this to a person who is exactly presenting. And there's 2 elements to that. I talked about the person being well-resourced.
Yes.
That the person's on your podcast tells me that there's a very strong likelihood that they're well-resourced, but I need to check that.
Sure.
And secondly, I need to make sure that the person is in a situation in their life that's presenting that can act as substrate for them to learn these lessons in the direct experience of their own life. Because the reason that I'm able to help so many people so much, and you say you're really passionate, why wouldn't I be passionate?
Yeah.
I get to help hundreds of people at a time to impact 10,000 other people or more immediately, and then maybe 100,000 or more people through the course of their life. So, do I feel like I'm living my best life? Wow, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's incredibly important that only people that are adequately resourced in their environment and in their internal operating, allowed into the program. And secondly, that they've got a clear presenting situation, something that's coming up in their life at the moment that they can use as substrate to actually get the benefit of this through their direct experience. Then they're not reliant on me. People are amazed. They're like, oh, I've been doing this for, the fastest it can be done is in 7 weeks. And a lot of people do it in 7 weeks. They go, yep, I got it. See you later, Dave. Thanks for that. And people are amazed at how quickly they can make that transformation because it's a very different relationship to what most people are used to with transformation, where you've got this guru who knows all this stuff about the world and they impart some sort of wisdom on you and then all of a sudden you're emancipated. It's not like that. The reality is when a person is moving into one of these crucible challenges in their life and they use that as a substrate to have a breakthrough, that's deeply integrated into their personal experience and knowing of themselves. And so once they've had this experience once, it allows them to have it in all future experiences. And this is why it's incredibly powerful. And so in order to allow people into the program, we have a 1-hour webinar for people to watch, and it runs people through the process of being able to figure out if this is them now. And if it's not them now, then they can see that at the end of the webinar. And then from there, then they have a call with me and I double and triple check to make sure that this person is perfectly suited for this program. If the person is perfectly suited and then they engage with it, within 7 weeks, they can have this and then they have it until they die. And so it's the place for them to go is that webinar, to just simply view that webinar. And if at the end of the webinar, their subconscious is saying, yep, this is the thing, then it is the thing. And then they just contact me. We have a half an hour chat on the phone. I run them through a second level of checking because I don't want to waste anyone's time with this and I don't want to move anyone into this situation unless they've got the exact right setup, so that we can just, if it's set up right, we knock it down and it's incredibly easy. If they're not exact set up for that, in that call, I'll just explain to them why and when they can come back. Or if they want to get something done immediately, there are lots of generalists that offer the skills training of what I've been talking about, but it won't penetrate anywhere near as deeply. And it's a significant amount more effort for a much lesser return. It's like a 10x, whereas this program is more like 100x. If the person is presenting exactly right. And that's the only space I'm interested in working in. If I want to add 100 times value to a human being. So once the person does that webinar, if they don't feel well matched, they can still get in touch. We can have a chat about where they're at, and then I can direct them to a world-class resource that will allow them to move this stuff forward. And then when they either have the resourcing that they need, or depending on what's lacking, or their life is going too well at the moment, right? Yeah. They don't have enough. If there's no external pressure, there's no crucible, or there's no rite of passage presenting at the moment, they go and do that stuff that will develop their awareness. And then when they start to feel that burnout kicking in, then they can come back to me and we can use that burnout situation as this leverage point for them to be able to then take their life to that. They're 10xing out there in society at the moment. They can then be starting to then move that Titanic to be able to become one of these people that can effortlessly add that 100 times value out there.
Incredible. Well, fantastic. We'll have all the relevant links associated with the podcast.
There's just a link. You just click and you just go on, and that is custom designed to be able to, you can watch it or you can literally just listen to it on your commute. And it's designed to work straight to the subconscious and give you, if your subconscious says this is the thing, then it's the thing. And you can struggle against all that you want. Your subconscious will keep bringing it up every time a crucible situation comes in your life. Or if it's not, and it's not, then just come back to me and we'll have a quick chat on the phone and I'll direct you to an immediate resource that will allow you to experience some of this stuff.
Yeah. Dave, it's been incredibly insightful. As I said, I think listeners should go back and listen to this a couple of times as well and find some gold again and again. Thank you so much for your insight, your perspective, and your willingness to share some of the depth of knowledge that you have around entrepreneurship and some high-level operation as a human, as a health professional, and as a business owner as well. Thank you so much for joining us on the episode. If you want to follow up on the links will be with the recording of this podcast at clinicmastery.com, and we'll see you on another episode of the Grow My Clinic podcast very soon.
This is the Grow My Clinic podcast by Clinic Mastery, where we help you deliver amazing client experiences to grow your clinic.